is how to show up to all of that in the best possible state of mind and body in order to achieve the best possible results. And of course, there are numerous things that we need to do in order to, quote unquote, show up at our best, where we would stand the best possibility of performing our best and learning the best in those learning bouts. Things like getting adequate sleep, getting sunlight in our eyes early in the day, adequate and proper nutrition, social connection, and so on. We talked about all of that in previous podcast episodes, so I'm not going to talk about those again now, but it is important to recognize that the backdrop of our lives, how well we've slept, what's going on in our personal lives, will all impact things like motivation and, frankly, our ability to even identify what's important. Because, if we're dealing with a health crisis or someone close to us is dealing with a health crisis, we tend to have our attention diverted toward that. But I do want to acknowledge all of that because it is critically important in defining how you're going to show up to these endeavors, and for that matter, all endeavors. Now, with that said, there are a few things that you can do in order to try and optimize your ability to focus and your level of motivation during your goal pursuits. And there are some really interesting data and protocols that I haven't talked so much about on this podcast ever that are relevant to today's discussion. And this relates to our so-called circadian rhythms in attention. We have robust rhythms in our ability to focus and our level of motivation that vary across the 24-hour, aka circadian cycle, with a regular rhythmicity that is independent of how badly we want a goal or how afraid we are of failure, right? All the stuff about motivation and fear of failure and desire, etc., all of that is still true, but we all have a naturally occurring rhythm of rise and fall and return to rise and fall of our levels of attention and motivation. And this is something that's been described beautifully in the scientific literature. In fact, I'll provide a link to what I consider a really nice review on this topic. This is a review that was published by Pablo Valdez in the Yale Journal of Biology and Medicine in 2019, entitled Circadian Rhythms in Attention. And there's a lot of information within this review, but we can distill out a couple of useful gems from it. So if you are somebody who is embarking on the pursuit of a goal which is particularly hard, that's going to require a really high level of motivation and focus, know that there are 3 times during the day when you stand to have the greatest level of focus and attention. And of course, this will vary depending on when you went to sleep at night and when you wake up. There's natural variation in circadian rhythms, but it's worth knowing that most people find that their level of attention and motivation is going to be highest 30 minutes, 3 hours, and 11 hours after waking up. Okay, so 30 minutes, 3 hours, and 11 hours after waking up. And this relates to a number of important biological principles related to circadian shifts in body temperature, which are also related to circadian shifts. That means changes around the 24-hour cycle in the release of particular neurochemicals, so the amount of dopamine available to be released by any sort of goal pursuit or reward, the amount of serotonin available, lots of neurochemistry in there, lots of neural circuitry. But these heightened levels of focus and motivation that just occur naturally, regardless of what goal one is trying to pursue. In fact, regardless of whether or not you're trying to pursue any goal, 30 minutes, 3 hours, and 11 hours after waking, your focus and motivation are going to be their greatest relative to other times in that 24-hour cycle. Now, as I tell you this, I can imagine that some of you are thinking, great, I'm going to schedule one bout of goal pursuit 3 hours after waking and another one 11 hours after waking. Great. If you can do that and that fits with your work and other demands of life, your relationships, etc., terrific. However, I don't want this 30-minute, 3-hour, and 11-hour protocol to be considered a rule. And here's why. Most people don't have a tremendous degree of control over their schedule. Things like work and family and other demands constrain them in terms of when they can get the work in. And while I do think it's extremely valuable to schedule the specific time or roughly the specific time, even though that's an oxymoron, meaning a period of time during the day, say before 9 a.m. or between 9 and noon, that you are going to carry out your goal pursuit endeavors. I've talked about this in previous podcasts. Some people do very well by scheduling an exact time from noon to 2. I'm writing. Other people, like myself, do a little better if I set a constraint, but it's a little bit broader, such as I'm going to exercise before 9 a.m. That could be any time before 9 a.m. Or I'm going to engage in language learning sometime between, say, 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. as opposed to setting a specific time. That's just what works best for me. People vary in terms of whether or not they respond best to setting a specific time or a time block and setting up these kind of barriers after which you are essentially telling yourself you won't do it. But, and this is a very important but, it is most important that you actually engage in the goal pursuit. And I experienced this recently. I'm trying to run more these days. I still enjoy doing resistance training. I still run 3 days a week, but I'm trying to run a little bit longer as opposed to just doing the one long run per week and then 2 shorter runs later in the week. I've talked about this in my Optimal Fitness Protocol episode. If you want to check that out, or check out the PDF where it's all distilled down to 1 or 2 pages if you like. But in any event, these days I'm trying to extend the amount of time that I'm running. I'm just enjoying that. It's kind of a throwback for me to when I ran cross country as a senior in high school. And this was the time of year when I would start getting ready for the fall season. So I'm enjoying running more. And just this last week, I had the experience of having a very full Sunday. And that's usually the day when I run in the morning or hike during the middle of the day. And I simply did not get around to it because I had a lot of other important things to do. And what I found was 9 p.m. rolled around, 10 p.m. rolled around, and I started thinking, I wish I had gone running. My Monday was going to be busy. So what did I do? I laced up my shoes and I went for a run at 10 p.m., something I probably haven't done since college or maybe even high school. And I ended up running for 90 minutes from 10 p.m. until 11:30 p.m. Definitely not the optimal time for me to go running. In fact, I was thinking, this might disrupt my sleep, but in fact, it didn't. I came back, I showered, had a little bit of food, which normally I don't eat that late, and I slept like a baby. And I felt great the next day, waking up at my normal time.